And so what were you up to earlier today?
Today I didn't really do a whole lot of anything. Honestly, Sundays I kind of try to take things slow.
Chill.
I am prepping for. I have this gallery like group exhibition that I'm going to be part of this upcoming Thursday. Well, that's when the opening reception is. So I was like revising my artist statement and whatnot.
Awesome.
Just pondering on that, but lazy Sunday for the most part.
What does a lazy Sunday look like for you?
Waking up, making tea, sitting on my patio, and I want to say something deep like journaling, which I do occasionally write and journal, but there's a little bit of doom scrolling a little bit.
What is that?
Doom scrolling.
What's doom scrolling?
When you get in this habit of when you're on your social media feeds and you just can't help but
keep going.
You keep going.
Dude,
yeah,
that must be something new I haven't heard.
Oh, doom scrolling? Yeah. I don't know where the doom part comes from. I guess maybe because it's just like a bad habit. It's
doom.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think the first time I heard that term was like in the midst of the pandemic, because I think like that was when I feel like my attachment to social media radically changed, like because I was constantly wanting to get updates on what was going on with the world.
Oh yeah.
And then I heard the term doom scrolling thrown out there, so I assumed it had something to do with the fact that you were digesting so much content, most of which was not the brightest of things,
Oh yeah.
So
because everyone's in their home. It's all conjecture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that and like people getting sick and stuff. So doom. Yeah.
Right. I guess that's doom scrolling. Oh my god, the world's ending.
Yeah. But the term has just stuck, because I guess there's just like this general association that like spending like social media does not like have a positive effect on your mental health. It's kind of one of those like vices, things that you can like dabble in every now and then, but you shouldn't like overindulge.
Exactly. And don't get confused with success on an app with success in your life.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
You can think that Instagram is the world.
Yeah.
Like that is the world that everyone lives in.
Like, yeah. I live inside of Meta's servers. Yeah. That's the whole world. It's a big part of the world.
It is. I mean, you got to be able to live, I guess you don't really live in it, but you got to be able to take part in both to survive these days.
Yeah. Yeah, people say that, like, it's like you even if you don't like social media and you hate it, like, you have to use it somewhat, and it's like,
I mean, I guess it depends on what app you use.
It also depends on what you're doing as well.
Yeah.
I guess I think that's something that, like, my friends say, because a lot of us are, like, artists and stuff, because,
I think with that, it's important because a lot of what art is visual and interactive, I guess. And
there's like marketing too.
Yeah.
Like, some people don't have to market themselves.
Well, like, if you don't market, I mean, if you don't have anything online about yourself, it's like, do they come to some random store where your stuff is?
Yeah.
How do they find you?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I feel like, in my opinion, I feel like social media, or at least in the regards as to why I use it, is so that people can find you and think what you're doing is cool and then connect with you. You know what I mean? It's like to be found, not to change what you're doing, but just to be, because no matter what you're doing, there's people out there that will probably like what you're doing. You know what I mean? All you gotta do is find them.
Like, the types of social media too. I've always been like late to like every game.
Same here.
Yeah, like, and a lot of my social medias, other than Instagram, which most don't exist anymore, were like made for me by friends. Like, you should get yourself a Twitter. Here, let me like make you one.
Dude,
or something like that. And I'm like, and I'd use it for like a little bit, and then I'm like, I don't really think I like have really anything interesting to say. For example, like on Twitter, I'm like, it's not how I like to engage with the world in a way.
Right.
And the only reason why Instagram stuck with me was because, like, way back in the day, I guess the design philosophy of Instagram was supposed to be a lot like uploading Polaroids of your life, like,
right.
And so I took to that because, like, I like photography. Like, that's that's the one thing I really like and enjoy. But things like Snapchat and Twitter, like I got rid of those at some point.
I got rid of
Yeah.
Snapchat as soon as Instagram did stories because I was like, well, there's no point in doing Snapchat now.
Yeah. Yeah, like also I was only like using it with like two of my friends too, and I was like, y'all can text me. Like,
yeah, just send me the funny photo or something.
yeah, yeah.
I don't know, yeah, because that's a different game in itself.
Mm-hmm. Pretty big on Reddit though, I guess. Like that's like something I use a lot, but that's like not even like social media because it's like anonymous and I don't really post on it. You know, it's more of like a aggregate website for like accumulating links and articles and stuff.
Right,
It's
you can
like,
find things that are relevant to you.
yeah, it's more of like a tool and like a forum, you know. So I don't really consider it social media, even though it's like it is a social platform and it's socially like dictated. Like there's a voting system and stuff.
Oh yeah, I guess because people are like, this is irrelevant. Answer
Which
this.
which is unique too, because like you know, like Instagram only has like positive reinforcement, like likes and sharing, whereas like Reddit has like downvoting. Like you can like negatively impact like a post's performance, which is like, you know, I haven't really decided how I feel about that. Like I guess that's truly democratic, but also like can I feel like that can generate some problematic like behavior. People can like in aggregate like remove and censor things, you know, because you have the ability to like lower things on like the feed.
Right, especially like esoteric things or specific things, and then you don't want the general public just being like, I don't know what that is,
Yeah.
downvoting whatever they might not know what they're talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, cool. I think we've gotten a good start here.
Cool.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Nashville Artist. I'm Jordan, and today Michael Santoro is here. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, awesome. So, where are you from?
I'm from here. I grew up like in Brentwood, Tennessee. Well, I was born in like Ohio, and I was there for like 3 years. But those are the kind of years that only exist as like vague memories. So my core memories started here.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You were born in Ohio?
Yeah, I was born in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Okay. And then how old were you? Like and then immediately moved here?
Yeah, I think I was like 3 when I moved. So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I'm not from Ohio. I mean, I'm from Ohio, but I'm not from Ohio.
I understand.
Yeah.
Do you have any siblings?
Yeah, I'm the oldest of 3, so I have a younger brother and younger sister. We're each 3 years apart.
What are their names?
My brother is Matthew. He's 3 years younger than me, and my sister Mia is 6 years younger than me.
Oh well. Do they also do art?
In a way, I guess like they're creative in their own way. My brother's like, I'd call him a mathematician. I don't know what he would call himself, but he studies mathematics.
Very analytical.
He is, but like I feel like he applies it in pretty creative ways. He is about to start a job at this company, MathWorks, and they do like math coding software.
Oh.
But yeah, he's like definitely got that going for him. Like, yeah, analytical. That's the way of putting it. And then my sister, she's like, I mean, she's 6 years younger than me, so she's still figuring out a lot. She's really interested in like TV production in a way. Yeah, so she's really involved with her school's like media production facility.
That's cool.
Yeah, so I think I don't know. It's like I feel like my brother and I kind of have like 2 hemispheres of the brain covered, and my sister's like trying to wiggle in somewhere.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, but I think she's like, yeah, she's her own budding flower. She'll find something unique for herself.
Sure. Yeah. What about your parents? Are they creative or?
My parents, my dad's a doctor, and my mom was a nurse, and then now my mom works with like therapy dogs now. And then my dad recently retired, but he was working as a pharmaceutical research engineer.
Oh, really?
So, you know, on the outside, probably no, not artistic.
No,
but I think there's creativity in some of the things that they do.
Wow. I wonder if your dad ever interacted with my dad.
Oh, yeah?
My dad was a pharmacist.
Really?
I mean, yeah, for like 30 or 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know.
My dad, like, he works from home, or he worked from home most of the past couple of decades.
So it was probably behind the scenes more or less.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
gotcha.
They he funds like research projects basically.
Oh, well, that explains your brother's very analytical nature.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not quite sure if that's something I think about a lot, is like how I chose the path that I did.
It probably gave you a very keen eye and sense of awareness because,
Mm-hmm.
like, having people that are like, I feel like that level of like intelligent in their profession probably just like naturally make things uh, like mentally somewhat easier, or like how to get in depth with things because they have such deep knowledge of what they know. If that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. Yeah, I think the way in which I think about things mirrors a lot of my siblings and my parents. It's more of the application that has widely changed in
You
my family.
probably have a sense of like precision.
Yeah, definitely. I guess yeah, precision as in process control sort of
Yeah,
thing.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
That probably was instilled,
Oh yeah,
and that
absolutely.
came out in your creativity.
Yeah, I learned a lot about that in school, how yeah, I could be a little bit of a control freak at first, because until up until I decided to really start pursuing artwork, I was originally studying to be an engineer, and so there was a lot of rigid sort of um, lines of thinking for how you had to do things.
Oh yeah,
And so I feel like I carried that with me at first into my artistic process, and I've shed a little bit of that over time, but I think I still retain a little bit of that.
like everything's an equation.
Yeah, in a way. Yeah, and I think I've learned to channel that in the parts of my craft that matters, the technical aspects of things like lighting, how much lighting, and how we're going to diffuse it and stuff like that. But I've learned to kind of keep it out of the more metaphysical conversations I have with myself about what the subject matter means and whatnot. Those aren't things that you can really formulate in something I can't put that on engineering paper and give you an equation. But
Like, I'll like without drawing the picture,
mm-hmm.
you'll be able to see what the picture is because I'll write it on paper.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, that doesn't really translate to what you see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the other thing too is so it's funny when it comes. Well, a lot of people think of when they think of storyboarding, visual artwork, they think of pictures, little cartoon drawings. Um, One, I'm not very talented at drawing, so I don't draw my storyboards. They're usually they look very formulaic. I do write things out in a sort of a bullet point notation where things channel in on singular subjects. But yeah, I feel like my storyboarding would look more like an engineer's notepad than it would a storyboard artist for a film or something like that. Yeah.
But it's how you understand it.
Yeah, it's how I
it's
think.
for you.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Awesome. So, what were you like as a little kid, or what were you into as a little kid?
Well, you get different answers asking me versus my siblings. But as a kid, I was pretty introverted. I mentioned that I grew up in Brentwood, and Brentwood has sort of a monoculture, like one line school system, ever the there's yeah, it's very monoculture, and so I didn't realize until later in life that I just didn't really fit in that well with what the standard was set as in Brentwood, but I mostly kept to myself. I loved like video games. I love reading. I love writing. I would like write little short stories and stuff when I was younger. My parents thought I was going to be a writer or journalist at first. And they would push that upon me. Um, and I, my brother and I loved like exploring like the wilderness and stuff. We would like hike and build like little forts and whatnot.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mostly kept with like myself and my brother. My brother and I were really really tight. And then when my sister came along, I don't know, we really stuck together as a family unit. You know.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Mm.
What did you like? How many acres did you live on, or like was there woods close to your house?
I don't remember how many acres, but there was like yeah, so there was woods like right behind our house.
Oh.
So yeah, like just walk out into the backyard and
What kind of forts would you make? Like,
oh, you know, like in the mind's eye, it would like probably seem like some sort of giant castle made of like sticks and twigs, but I'm sure it was just like I'm sure we just put like tarp over a tree that fell over and called it a day. But like in my mind, we had like these like elaborate little like fort structures of multiple different rooms and stuff. Um, yeah, and we like would invite the neighborhood kids out there and whatnot.
wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it reminds me of we had woods next to my elementary school, and we'd go into the woods and like they go like there would be all these creeks and streams, and we'd build bridges across them and like cut down trees and
Mm-hmm.
hack up the wood and
Mm-hmm.
tie ropes to like wood together. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it was yeah. Forts were a huge part of my childhood.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So you're really into forts as a little kid. What kind of books did you read when you were a little kid?
Um, I think it was mostly like non-fiction. My grandfather worked for National Geographic.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so we would get those like all the time, and not only like the magazines, but also those like special edition books they would do about certain topics. I was mostly obsessed with the illustrations, but yeah, I just loved reading about like places and different parts of the world. But definitely mostly engrossed by the photography, like in the magazines and stuff.
Yeah.
hmm
What video games did you play as a little kid?
Um, so I got like I didn't have like a console or anything when I was a kid. We had like a family computer, and so I would get like these little like we used to be able to get like PC games on disc in stores and stuff like that.
Right.
And I played so many miscellaneous things, like little like there was like these discs you could get that would come with like 50 mini games on them and stuff. But eventually, I got this thing called the Orange Box, which was like a collection of video games from this company, Valve, and it was like these like it came with like these like sci-fi video games called Half Life.
Oh yeah, I remember Half-Life.
Yeah, and then came with like Counter Strike and Team Fortress 2. It was like it was all these video games built on the same game engine.
Hmm.
But I just like really got engrossed with those because it was my first time playing like a 3D like first person interactive game, like which really engrossed me because I was like, I mean, a whole world basically in my computer, you know, and so I quickly became like obsessed with those, and my brother and I would like play them like all night and stuff, and but those I loved like that's what it kind of like launched my like love of like science fiction was like through stuff like that. I'm a big sci-fi nut.
Oh yeah, what's your favorite sci-fi movie?
Um,
What did you like as a kid?
as a kid, well, so I love sci-fi and I love horror because when I was really young, my mom and I, and I, well, yeah, my mom and I watched the movie Alien
Oh
together.
yeah.
Yeah, and so like maybe like that imparted like a little bit of trauma on me, but at the same time too, I just really loved like this idea of like just like people lost in space on this like dark voyage
Oh
and
god.
yeah, on different planets. Also, the design of like the alien was like so foreign, and like I never seen like a monster that looked like that before. I like that, and then I was into Star Wars. I like Star Wars a lot. Those are the classics. Never got to Star Trek.
Star Wars. Did you watch 1, 2, and 3?
I watched all of them. Yeah, I've seen all of them. I mean, I haven't seen the new ones. I kind of.
But I mean, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6.
Mm-hmm.
When we were kids.
Yeah,
like those were the new ones.
Yeah, the new like the prequel ones. Yeah. I saw. I forgot. I think I saw like the third one in theaters.
Revenge of the Sith.
The one where like Anakin becomes Darth Vader, like Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah, dude, that came out May 19, 2005. I saw it the first day it came out.
I think I was like, I forgot if I saw it in theaters or not, because remember I was like just at the age where like I would have to have gone with my dad and stuff, and like I forgot if he was like chill with that or not.
Oh yeah,
because I remember like that movie was like
PG-13.
Yeah, exactly.
For Star Wars, that was PG-13.
That's what it was. I was like, man, there's something about that movie that was like, I don't want to use the word controversial, but it was like
it had to be. I mean, it was
Which I watched it not too long ago, and it's like it was pretty graphic. Like honestly, like the scene where he gets his like limbs cut off and he's like on fire too, and then there's reconstructive surgery on him. I was like, that's like it was like just that scene. That's probably why it was PG-13.
Right. That
they probably fought for it too. I bet you it was like going to be R or something, but they had the money to get it down.
Yeah. I mean, just at the end when he's like, "I hate you."
Right.
It's like, yeah, this is definitely not PG.
No. But yeah, like I think like video games were like a big part of like my childhood because of like the escape they offered. Like I was mentioning earlier, like I was really introverted as a kid, and I quickly like got into like online video games. So like, because it was weird, like I was introverted in school. Like I didn't really wasn't like the best at making friends and stuff, but like I was like really social online on video games. I love talking with people online. Like something about the anonymity just like removed a lot of my
fear.
My anxiety and stuff.
Wow, what a console was that like?
What's up?
What console was that? Or you said it was on the computer?
On computer.
Oh yeah, because Counter-Strike was huge.
Yeah, I still play that to this day. Yeah.
My brother's friend's brother would go over to their house, and he was always playing Counter-Strike, and he was always like showing us these different maps that people had created.
Yeah.
Where they had like rigged the game or something.
Yeah, that was like so, like the whole like source engine, like where these games are built on. Like I don't know, like I feel like it's still to this day it might have like an inspiration for a lot of my like aesthetics that I like when it comes to like liminal spaces and stuff, because like although it was groundbreaking at the time, but like the way in which like that engine has shown its age is specifically in like these like out of bound sceneries, like the landscapes and the backdrops to all these like levels you're on are like super low fidelity and flat, and have this really like eerie sense to them when you take them out of the context of like the immediate level. And I, when I was a kid, like I loved breaking the game. Like I loved like finding ways to enter cheats where I could like fly around and get out of the level and stuff. Just because like, I mean, I only had the one game and I beat it. So like, what else can I do with it? Just like take it apart. And yeah, like flying out of bounds of the game and just seeing all these like unused assets by the developers just kind of like floating out there. It was like, I don't know, it was like eerie, but I felt like it was like Easter egg content. Like I was finding these little special secrets like scattered around the game.
Dude, yeah, that reminds me of, I remember I used to play Halo co-op mode with one of my friends. He's like, dude, I can show you a secret place, and it's the snow level on the first one, and you jump off the bridge and you can like scale down the cliffs get to the bottom and like bypass half the game.
But it's like in that journey, it's like you're taking the scenery and it's like you're not supposed to see this.
Yeah.
Or it's like you're supposed to see it, but maybe like in your periphery.
Not from that vantage point.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you're not supposed to jump off the bridge and still survive. You're supposed to kill you. But since you're down there, you see all the weird
that's a good aspect too. It's like it's supposed to kill you, like in the game, like you're not supposed to get here, and a lot of times like the consequence is death, and so it's like maybe that's like why it was so eerie, because like I'm here, it's like I'm not supposed to be here. That's like that is kind of like encapsulates a lot of like what I try to chase in certain aesthetics of mine, is like the idea that you're not supposed to be here, you know. Mainly for my like landscape work that I do.
Yeah. Man, Counter Strike. That's like the original Call of Duty, basically.
Oh yeah. I love that game. I play it a lot to this day. It's like got such a long lineage.
Do they just like update the graphics?
They not frequently. No, it's really like one of those games that like just kind of is like, you know, like
They kept it the way it is.
Yeah, I mean they'll do like quality of life things, and like the graphics have changed slowly over time, but like the most of it's remained relatively unchanged, just because it's such like a purist game. Like there's not like all these fancy things that like all these modern video games have.
Oh
Yeah, like crazy destruction and helicopters and vehicles. Like there's none of that. Like which has made it popular.
I remember playing this very arcade game when I was a little kid. It was called Tibia. And it was like, for its time, it was lo-fi or like low quality, but that's what the charm was of the game. And they didn't change it. And I always respected that.
It speaks to the testament of it, like through time, the fact that like you can change so little, and like even though people's cultural tastes have changed over time, like it still remains popular.
Yeah, I mean, it had like a cult-like following. It was like a RPG. It could be like a paladin or wizard or whatever, and you go around this world and kill things and collect things and sell things and trade. And but it was like all like everything was like a square. Like you'd move up a square, move over here is a square.
Oh,
you know what I mean? Everything was like very, I don't know,
segmented.
Yeah, you would only you couldn't move diagonally. Really, it was like go this way.
Yeah, there's no getting out of bounds with those kind of things.
Yeah, exactly. Like someone can block you in, and that's what happened is like if there's an enemy, someone could stand in the way of the door, and then you can't get through, and then you get killed, and then they take your loot.
So it was like online too.
Yeah, it was online too.
Yeah, I love like. Yeah, it's crazy. Like I was like so antisocial in school, but there was like these games that like there's this game Gary's Mod where like it was sort of like, so that's the thing, it was a sandbox game, like really, you know, like it's just like very open-ended, you can build games with inside the game. And these like this one game that became popular was like sort of like one of those things that became very popular now with these like games that kids are playing called like Among Us and stuff like that, these like social deception games where like you're trying to like achieve a task but like not like let anyone in on the fact that you're trying to achieve it. Like you're trying to kill all the other players, but like not, but do it in secret and try and like, it's almost like there's like detectives and then there's the murderers and you're trying to like, it's almost like it's like a live role play Clue. That's like what it is. And I really like that. Like I loved like role playing. Like I loved like talking with these people and like trying to like fit in. Like it was almost like my analytical brain was like trying to like study how to fit in, like in a way, like was like taking a very analytical approach to socializing in a way
on the game.
Yeah, like maybe, and like that was like retrospectively thinking about it, it's like was that just me like practicing like how to socialize or something? I don't know.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Wow. So, what first got you into photography or art? How did you start out?
Well, as for the actual act of like taking photos with the intent of like creating artwork, like I got my first like dedicated camera when I was like a freshman in college, because that's when I thought I was going to be an engineer. But I was pretty stressed out and dissatisfied with like how that like I wanted a distraction from like my studies because they were really overwhelming to me. I hadn't learned at the time that I wasn't really cut out to be an engineer, or I wouldn't say cut out, but it wasn't what like my passion was. And so I wanted to pick up something on the side. And I was always drawn to photography through, growing up with National Geographic and stuff like that. And so I decided to get a camera, and I was like, oh, I'm just gonna like, that's actually why I made like an Instagram, because I was like, oh, like I'm gonna like just like have a little photo diary. And so I started doing that, and then I started like at the same time also getting really into film and like movies and stuff. And so basically that kind of like those two like passions grew together, my interest in film and my interest in photography. And I guess eventually they like budded to a point where they, I don't know, my passions and my interest for it got so strong, and then I was introduced to people that were pursuing it professionally, at least like studying it in school. And I was like, oh, like, maybe that's why I'm not satisfied with what I'm doing right now, is because I'm just not doing the thing that I want to do. And so with the encouragement of my friends, I switched my major into cinema studies, and at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. And then there I like concentrated on like specifically cinematography, which was like kind of like what I thought was like the blend of the two. I love photography, I love filmmaking. Like that's how I blend the two together.
Nice. So it wasn't until college that you,
Yeah, it really wasn't until college. I mean,
or did you,
I made like home videos when I was a kid. Like I had a camcorder and stuff, and um,
what did you do like in middle school and high school? Did you pursue any artistic stuff then, or
I dabbled in so many things. I tried music. I played guitar for like a little bit. Didn't really take to it. I liked writing. I liked writing short stories and stuff when I was in middle school and high school. Um, I really enjoyed my English classes, learning about the art of the personal essay and so on and so forth. But I the culture in which I grew up, like in Brentwood, wasn't at least for me like the most
nourishing?
nourishing for artists. It was very much so felt like a pipeline for like you know people in STEM or in business, and so I felt like I kind of like kept those things on the back burner. Like maybe they were like growing inside of me on like a very deep level, but I never really like looked at it like directly in the eyes as something that like was a passion of mine until I like left that like bubble and that atmosphere.
Oh yeah, where
Mm-hmm.
they're trying to like keep you on track.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it was such a rigorous like. I mean, for like a high school, like yeah, I mean, it was rigorous. They call themselves like a public school, but it felt more like a private school.
Oh really?
Mm-hmm.
What was that school?
Brentwood Middle and Brentwood High School.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so like I felt like I just felt like I knew I wasn't fitting in, but because it's all I knew, I just assumed it was like there was just something wrong with me. Like, oh, it might just be because I'm not good at socializing. Like once I go, like that's what I need to work on. It's not that I haven't found what I'm passionate about and it's not being nourished. It's just that I'm not good enough at the things I'm supposed to be good at, which I thought was like engineering and computer science. And so that's why I came into college with that attitude, was like, okay, like I got to get on this. I got to fix this. Like I'm supposed to be good at this stuff, and I'm not. And so I kind of like my transition into photography was like almost through like a breakdown of character, like a mental breakdown almost, because I was like it got to the point where I was hitting rock bottom. Like I was doing well, my grades were well. I mean, I was like I was all A's like in all my engineering classes, but I was so stressed and I was so depressed, and I was like none of this makes me happy, and it seems like it's only getting worse. And then like it wasn't until someone kind of like my friends like took my head and turned it a different direction, and were like, look, there's all these other things you can do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you're under the influence of someone, I guess, correcting that or being, because you, like you
Mm.
said, you can see all these other people doing it,
yeah, like my roommate at the time, like one of them was doing graphic design, and like a couple of our friends that we made were like, or that I made, were like really into filmmaking. That's how I found out about the filmmaking program. I was like, but it took a while. It took the breakdown of the self for me to like even start putting the pieces together in a new way, because I still had all this like foundational sort of um like baggage that I had to like get rid of before I could start pursuing something else. Because and I maybe I didn't completely get rid of it, because I still to this day, maybe not so much now in this moment, but like for a while, even like through college and afterwards, I was like battling with this imposter syndrome that like like I'm going to be a failure because I like didn't stick with what I was supposed to stick with. There was this pathway laid
All
out.
or nothing.
Yeah, I have a very like all or nothing sort of like mentality sometimes, which I feel like I've been able to like tackle that and get better at through time, but it definitely was like an inhibitor.
Living by absolute.
Yeah, like Star Wars, like like a
only
Sith.
Sith.
Yeah, like a
Live by
yeah,
absolute.
yeah, I had that Sith mindset. We're for breaking that down now, but yeah, no longer dealing with absolutes. Well, trying not to.
Dealing in absolutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, only Sith deals in absolutes.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's Obi-Wan that says that.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's in episode
Third
3,
one.
right? Yeah. Man, maybe that episode did give me some trauma, man. I like really.
Man,
Yeah.
that impacted the crap out of me.
Mm-hmm.
At one point, I was like, maybe I should scar my face.
Yeah, because it looks cool.
Yeah, because I was like, Anakin's got a scar,
Mm.
and I was like, that'd be really cool to have a scar. Like, and I was
Yeah.
like, yeah, no.
Who's the actor that plays
Hayden Christensen.
Yeah. Did he just fall off the earth after those movies? Like,
he had so much. He talks about how much pressure he had, like for him to play Anakin, and like he wanted to play Anakin. He thought it was an honor, but then there was like all this backlash about how bad he portrayed Anakin, and then like he became like a nobody to one of the most famous actors because he played this iconic role. And he said it was so much pressure that I bought a ranch in Wyoming and then disappeared for a while because it was so intense being in like the limelight like that. He said he couldn't handle it. So yeah, he disappeared. He didn't want to be seen.
Wow, that's intense. One.
Yeah, he said it was awesome, but he was like, man, it was so. I mean, like you couldn't escape, you know.
Oh yeah, it's kind of like what we're talking about, like like he.
When he also didn't feel worthy because he was like, oh, my co-star was Natalie Portman. He thought that she was like way better than he was, and like.
Right, kind of like he really succumbed to like imposter syndrome.
Yeah, Ewan McGregor. You know, like you have all these other like Samuel Jackson. I mean, Star Wars had a lot of big actors in it.
It's like crazy how the mind can like invalidate itself. Like it's like you're surrounded by these A-list stars because someone deemed you good enough, worthy, but like the mind perverts that into like, oh, like I'm going to let all these people down,
Plus, you're only like 22 or 23 years.
Oh, is he that young when he did that? Oh
yeah,
my
something
gosh.
like that. Yeah. I mean, he might have been like 24, 25 by the time third one rolled around, but
that's crazy, like how young some people get like started in that industry.
God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It can, I mean, yeah, I find it like it can be like being very predatory sometimes.
Well, being that young and being that famous messes with you. It's like one thing if you get famous when you're like 35 years old.
You have your social network set up.
And you have your sense of self developed.
Yeah.
And you kind of have your own values and principles with which you live by. But when you are still developing and you're only 22 years old, you become like the biggest jerk in the world because you think, you're.
Yeah, I've always had my gripes with like childhood acting because it's like, like you said, like they're developing their personality, and I feel like that's why it seems like sort of predatory because it's like the almost like the industry is like, we can make you the perfect actor because like we're literally shaping you as your brain's forming. It's like we were talking about before we started recording, like about like the plasticity of the brain and stuff. Like
Right.
just like, they're like trying to capitalize on that almost. Like, while
Right.
they're young. I don't know. It's coming from someone who like, I love film, and like I still like, I feel like it's like my inspiration for like how I tackle my photography, but it's such a complicated like culture, and with a long lineage of like drama and abuses and stuff. So.
Yeah, and it's also using young people. It's like you need a young person for it, but it's
Mm.
like there'll be consequences for this child.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they'll lose their innocence too early.
Did you ever watch that TV show recently? What was it called? The Rehearsal with Nathan
Oh,
Fielder.
I love Nathan Fielder.
Yeah,
I haven't watched all of the rehearsal.
that show was awesome. I mean, I feel like it was sort of like a kind of got into like a meta analysis of that, like a kid growing up in sort of like this staged reality.
Yeah,
Like it can be so damaging.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. I don't.
Which maybe it's like like that's like growing up in like a sort of community that I did, it almost was sort of like this staged reality in the sense that like
Your
it,
life is predetermined.
yeah, your life's predetermined, and it just doesn't match like what the obstacles you're actually going to navigate.
Mm-hmm. One of my favorite bands, lead singer, talks about how they got big when they were like late 20s, early 30s, and so talks about how like didn't the fame didn't change him as much. But he's like, when I met people who got famous when they're like 20, 21, they are entitled and they're jerks, because they let it go to their head. And he's like, only the time, you know, it's like being older when you get famous is like much healthier. I don't know, it's basically. But anyways, why would you say you're drawn to art?
um because I think it allows me it's sort of like an empathy exercise. I think it's like a chance to be understood in a way that most social structures don't allow you to be understood from strangers or friends. It that, and also it's like it's a problem to be solved, like a technical one. I mean, I enjoy puzzles and stuff, and so like I because like I said, I haven't been able to detach fully from that analytical part of my brain. So I don't know, it's almost like the perfect merging of like the hemispheres of like it's a problem for me to tinker with and solve. Like, how can I take these abstractions in my head and make it a physical reality, and then through that physical reality, how can I use it to like create a conversation, an empathetic conversation with people. Like, we can share a feeling, because in the beginning it starts with a feeling. Like, I have a feeling that I want to share with people. I want us to talk about this together. But in order for you to talk about it with me, you got to feel it as well. And then so that becomes the puzzle. Is like, okay, what's the solution to that? What are like the real life physical answers to create that feeling? What lighting evokes it? What kind of subject matter? What kind of composition? Like, what are the things that, when formulated together, will result in someone sharing an experience with me?
To get what's inside your head
Mm-hmm.
into someone else's head.
Mm-hmm.
I guess
Yeah.
we're always trying to get people to see how we see things.
Yeah. Because I feel like that's what it is. Like, I mean, communication was something that like I wanted to practice as a skill. I mean, I talked about earlier, like lightheartedly with the video game aspect, but it's also why I was into writing as a kid. Like, I feel like it seemed like the solution to me for a lot of angst that I had as a kid. Like a lot of the problems I had with like fitting in, I thought were like due to a lack of my ability to communicate my feelings and how I think. And so I practiced really hard, like to find ways in which I could communicate.
Nice. So, like, what photography was like the main way that you were able to like build a scenario?
Um, it feels like the one that um, the practice was the most entertaining. Like writing, like I love journaling, but like the act of getting people to like with like let me rephrase this. With photography, I loved the tool. I loved the camera. I loved learning how it worked. I loved like learning how to manipulate like the pictures that came out of it. Like I think it was more of just like the honing of the skill of like the lens and the camera. Just something about it felt very um, appealing to me as opposed to other mediums.
It's like a ritual.
It's ritualistic and it feels like almost scientific too, like the way in which you can
capture
an image and adjust how the image looks comes down to like it's almost formulaic in a way, the subject matter not so much, but how you expose the image.
Yeah. Like, how do we capture the light where it hits this angle just right? Well, you have to have the camera, like, whatever. That, how the precision or the mechanics can be really analytical because you're like, I can make it really precise.
And also just like it was a toy to tinker with, like because I was studying engineering at the time, and so I bought this like manual camera, and I guess it was just kind of like, oh, like it's like a not Rubik's cube, but it was like like all these new features and things to learn, and it just was like yeah, it was just a distraction at first.
Game.
Yeah, it was a game. Yeah, it was a game to distract me, and it just so happened that like it led down this rabbit hole.
A tinker toy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I've looked at all your photographs. I looked at all your work that you put on social media and went on your website. But my favorite is the In The Firmament. What inspired that?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. So project began as like a revisitation of like a project I did in school. So in school, I became friends with. Am I still recording?
Yeah, it's still working.
Okay. I became friends with some performance artists. They were MFA students, and they were studying like time-based art. Like it's called 4D art at UT. Basically, just art that it's a performance art or video art, like art that were part of the part of what you're utilizing is time, And so I became friends with them because I was taking some video classes, and we wanted to co-op on a project together where they could utilize, we could utilize both of our talents. And this woman, April Martin, who kind of almost became a mentor of mine, she wanted to tackle this idea of platonic intimacy, both like plutonic and platonic. So like the idea of like non-sexual romantic intimacy, and also like the like pure idea of intimacy, like the ideal intimacy. And so we orchestrated this project together that was like an interactive art exhibit where we rented out a gallery space and set up like a stage with like basically the whole entire floor was like mattresses, and then dangling from the ceiling in various places was these like thin translucent like fabrics. And the idea was that they choreographed, April and two other people, also performance artists. They basically orchestrated some loosely choreographed like movements that they thought were basically symbolic of this sort of like this intimacy that they were trying to like portray. And then the idea was that as people came into the gallery, they would slowly join the piece together. And my job was to then like film it, like find a way to like navigate the scene with a camera and capture these tender moments on film, which was a difficult task, and we knew that to begin with because you got this like very like ethereal environment, and then you have like me with like this camera, and the camera is like it's very like it can be aggressive sometimes when it's like having a camera pointed at you, but we wanted to like I don't know, we almost wanted a challenge for ourselves, like could we capture something like this on film? Is that possible? Can we like capture these like raw sort of like intimate like moments between people on camera? And we tried and we succeeded in a lot of ways, and maybe we failed in a lot of other ways that we have learned from since. But it was a really like unique project, and we turned it into a short film of sorts. And it was my first like introduction into like creating video art. And but basically, long story short, I was revisiting some old projects, saw that one, ended up calling up April just to have a conversation with her about it. And we over the phone, I like started workshopping with her idea of like revisiting that project, but from like a more of like a photographic perspective. Like instead of like creating video art of it, can we create like I want to create these like frozen moments of time with similar sort of energy, and then I also wanted to like incorporate visual inspirations that have like come to me since we filmed our last project. I've learned a lot. I've improved my skills on lighting and composition. I have like new ways in which I like to use color theory to like evoke emotions. And but yeah, so I basically like that was my attempt at just reimagining a project, but from just like in the way in which I used the camera in just a completely different way. Freezing time instead of expanding upon it and stretching it out and stuff.
Yeah, where was that taken?
We built that set in this studio called the Backlots. It's an extension. It's in the same vicinity of this camera rental company called Contrast Cinema. But yeah, so the woman who runs the place, Tiffany, she's awesome, but she's the stage manager for this like giant cyc wall. It's like a 12-foot cyc wall, which was like more than I needed and originally was looking for. But that was one of the first few places that became available to me because I have a friend who works in the camera rental industry. He's really good friends with Tiffany, and so I just got put into contact with her early on. But all that was necessary was I just wanted like an empty space, like a really blank canvas to kind of color and fill with like light, and to really accentuate sort of like the folds and forms of the people involved in the stage. So I almost got more than I got more than I asked for.
How did you create the orb?
And behind the characters. Yeah. So that's actually more of like an optical illusion. So the cyc wall, it's you got like it's two walls and a floor, and they meet in this curve, this like in the corner of the wall. And since it's all painted this uniform white, you can't really tell where that curve is. And so we projected this tungsten beam right in the vertice of like the wall. And basically what that did was like when we took pictures from certain angles, it like almost like looked like it was a three-dimensional object.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Because of the way that the space was wrapping around the characters.
Yeah, the orb. Like, what on earth?
It was almost like a happy accident. Like I wanted there to be an orb behind. I wouldn't call it an orb. I wanted there to be like a ring of light behind
Ring of
them.
light.
And then when we started setting it up in the wall, I decided to shoot it right in the corner. And then when we were taking pictures, like, you know, looking at them, I was like, oh, like, you know, it's developing this like 3-dimensional characteristic to it. And so we decided to like really lean into that. Because like I was really like, I wanted there to be like a little bit of like celestial imagery into it. I was reading a lot of science fiction at the time, and like I wanted there, like, you know, I like the idea of there being like these like gentle subjects, these really fragile things, but like just almost like being swallowed and like all encompassed by this like giant vastness around them, this giant vast empty void of space. And so um, that's why I wanted these giant like sun like objects behind them. But it just kind of almost ended up being like a happy accident that like they went from 2D to 3D in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What inspired the folds around the faces and stuff?
Um, I really so you know I studied like black and white photography quite a bit in school. Mainly because like for a whole year I only shot black and white, and I loved the way that like I forgot the term for it, but when you're forced to only work with light and shadow and not color, you come up with like interesting ways to kind of like um, confuse the viewer about what they're looking at. And one one way that was appealing to me was the way that like when you shot macro shots of the human body with like arms folding over each other or people bending at the joints, the way that like shadow and light falls on skin as it's like bending and folding, um, you know, one shot up close almost looked a lot like parts of the earth, like deserts and mountains when viewed from afar. Which I thought was interesting. It's like, you know, like when the earth viewed from really far out looks a lot like the human body when sort of like up close without the context of it being a human body. Like we have ridges, we have folds, and so I kind of wanted to like accentuate that. And so I came up with the idea of incorporating sort of this like translucent fabric because one, from a technical aspect, it adds some color contrast. You know, it reflects light, um, and it creates something for the viewer to like draw their eyes to. But also, you know,
And see through it.
yeah. So that was a big thing too. Was like the fragility. You know, that's like one of like the sort of ideas I was working with, the idea that like this sort of like tender intimacy is fragile. Um, and so I wanted to accentuate that like fragility. And so like, you know, I felt like the fabric, like humans and ourselves, like we can look fragile sometimes, especially when we're like, our skin is bare. But I also wanted like, you know, a lot of like the shoot was like improvised regarding like the way the subjects are posed. And I thought, like, if I'm going to have a lot of improvisation and we're going to be in the studio for a while shooting, you know, I want people to be comfortable. So instead of working with like just like, you know, bare subjects, I wanted, you know, let's like wrap ourselves with like these fabrics and just give them something to play with in a way. I feel like that because like, and though, you know, I wasn't using like models. These were like my friends, and because I just wanted to work with people that were all comfortable with each other. You know, so these are all my homies that were there, and I don't know, the way I feel like just giving them something to play with was just like a way in which I could kind of keep the atmosphere light, and you know, I don't know, just like it was almost like throwing like a wrench into things, like in a good way. Like I wanted there to be more dynamics for me to play with in a way.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought like I a big thing too though that like is less so about the folds and more so like how they interplay with touch. Like I, you know, to emphasize this like sort of like fragile nature of like intimacy. You know, I wanted like there not necessarily to be too much like skin on skin contact when people are like embracing each other. I always wanted there to be like this sort of fragile barrier between them, which was the fabric. It was sort of to represent like this is the thin veil that separates you and I, like the thing that like separates like this individual entity that is you and this individual entity that is me. We're both equally complex, but the thing that separates us and makes us unique and different is can be so fragile and thin sometimes when you get to know someone. And so that's sort of like what that was to represent as well.
And yeah, it reminded me of a couple of photos and paintings in this book, probably Leonardo da Vinci's work. And it also reminded me of, have you ever seen Alejandro Jodorowsky's Holy Mountain?
Oh, yes,
Remember
absolutely.
when they're shaving the heads?
Yes.
That's what that reminded me of. Especially when the shoulders are touching each other.
I love that. So the way of that movie, man, the way they employ color in that movie too, like color theory, like wonderful. I mean, yeah, definitely like
movie's madness.
yeah, absolute insanity. But
the Jesus Christ face like mushed. It's like a weird texture.
I only saw the movie once, and all I needed to see it. But,
I only saw it once. I never watched that again. But in the beginning, it's so weird when he's shaving their heads and they're in that weird room, and it's just
I think you brought up Da Vinci. Like I feel like sort of like maybe like a direct inspiration, but like when I was just thinking about like I feel like you return to core pillars of like when you're trying to just like compose people. And I feel like I don't know, like Renaissance paintings just like have sort of like found their way into like the social subconscious and like how we like pose people, like there's just certain really like, I don't know, like some things are just more appealing than others. Like the way that like people, there's a lot of like reaching and like bending and embracing, and,
showing movement or about to move.
To try and like it's a way of like trying to create dynamics in something that's ultimately just a still image.
Make it emotive. Like look here, you can see the folds in the clothing.
Yeah.
How a lot of his paintings, there's like folds in the.
I forgot that.
And he was also an engineer too.
Yeah.
Or what were you saying?
I blank on their name, but there was like this sculptor from around the same time period, and they like were phenomenal.
Michelangelo.
It may have been him, but like there was this one piece of like the Virgin Mary, and she has like it's marble, but like it's like she's got like a veil over her, like she's like wearing like a dress, and it's like it looks so fragile and real, like it looks so silky and smooth, and all the wrinkles, like everything about it looks like so delicate, but it's marble, like it's rock solid. You can you can see the translucence. Yeah, you can see the translucence. Like you can see like how like the face sort of like comes through, and in a way, like what's even crazier about it. I really should come prepared and like with the person's name. This wasn't like a direct inspiration, but you brought this up, and I'm remembering this. But like, there's this interesting thing that happens with the human eye, and it's accentuated on camera, but it's like moire patterns, which like. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but moire patterns are sort of like this optical artifact when you have like geometric patterns overlapping each other that are very similar in their repetitive nature. Like a good example would be like if you've ever looked through a screen porch when there's two screens behind each other, and you get this weird sort of like distorted pattern in it, or when you're driving past like fences on the side of a road, and there's two fences and they overlap each other, and you sort of get this weird sort of like. And
as you drive by it, it's almost
it's like sometimes they sync up and sometimes they don't sync up, and you get this weird like pattern. But like with like fabric, like specifically like the fabric I used, like it's in a way up close. It's just a bunch of little squares,
right?
And so and then a camera sensor. And almost like the human eye, like a camera sensor in a human eye, where there's like photo sites.
The optics.
Yeah. You have these photo sites that are like for a camera, it's like a very rigid pattern. But the eye, it's like, they're not a rigid pattern. It's still, laid out in a certain way. And sometimes when we look at like really like fine pattern structures, like in fabric, you get these weird sort of like distortions um, from the subject behind it, because the eye basically can only resolve so finely these details before it just kind of
Right.
before it gets almost like it vibrates a bit. And so I feel like it's crazy how like even like a sculptor back then was able to sort of like capture that in a way
Mm-hmm.
with like the way they marbled the fabric over the woman's face.
Yeah, I find the Renaissance period very fascinating.
Yeah, I feel like I really need to like give the classics like more attention. I feel like my introduction to like art is like always is been from like a contemporary lens. I love like contemporary cinema. I love contemporary photographers, and I like through school you learn about like some of like the you know the Renaissance people in the field. Like in photography, you got people like Henry Cartier-Bresson, like these people that like pioneered like street photography, for example. Like like I'm aware of them, but like I feel like most of my time studying things has always just been like a lot of contemporary stuff. And I don't know. I feel like I should like really take some time to like go back and visit like these like see how far back the lineage can go. Even though the advent of the camera is pretty clear. Like, we know when the camera was relatively invented, like in the certain
1800s.
Yeah, exactly. But like it's like although the camera was invented there, photography kind of was invented there. It's like it doesn't the way that we chose to compose and take photographs was obviously heavily inspired by how we were doing other visual art beforehand. And so it's like I really want to take some more time to like study like how far back you can go with that lineage before it's like too distilled.
Yeah, I feel like in the beginning, cameras were just shot to get portraits of situations. Like everything was staged and then take the picture. Where now it's
once it became like portable.
Now it's everything. It's not just a stage. It's like the cars driving by and take a picture. So I feel like that has the application is different. I mean, we still have school photos where it's like sit here.
It's so what's the word, like clinical,
or there's wedding photography. That's capture.
And there's people that manage to make it like that's what I mean. I've never really been like a portrait photographer. And I've always been amazed by people that were like really able to get like creative and artistic with their portrait photography, because like that's something that has such a long lineage of being like super clinical in photography. At least portraiture is like has like a very like long lineage as being like an artistic form, but like photography it almost like I know it wasn't like really it didn't really feel like until like contemporary times that like people started getting like a little weird with the lens, and how they took pictures of people.
Well, yeah,
especially color play too. I mean, that was the thing. I know like through the history of photography, like when color film was invented, it was like that was like the consumer's like film. Like real art was like black and white. That was like part of the conversation at the time, was like it's like, oh yeah, like there's color film that's like that's really cool for documenting the world, but when it comes to creating fine art, like that's black and white. Which from my perspective and a lot of people more now, it's like that's so silly. Like why
you're
would
cutting yourself off?
Yeah, it seems like a huge, really weird thing to gatekeep for some reason. But I don't know, like the history of photography has just kind of like found itself some quirks like that.
Right. Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. How do you develop your artistic skills?
Through just constantly taking photos. I mean, I recently, I want to call it downgraded, but downsized. That's the right way to put it. My main camera. I mean, other than my phone, because the best camera you have is the one that's on you. But like my like main everyday carry camera is like this like point and shoot that I have now. This digital point and shoot that can fit in my pocket and in my bag, because I decided that like when I go to do these like shoots, like my last project, like I can get access to the camera that I need for that specific job. But when it comes to just like my day-to-day visual journaling, I just want something that is really easy to and to keep on me, um, because it's less so about how you shoot the thing in the moment and more of just kind of like what I found interesting. But
Mm-hmm.
when I'm taking photos like day to day, that's what I'm trying to focus on, is like, not necessarily like creating like these like final products, these like powerful shots. It's more of just like, oh, like what did I take a picture of today, if anything? Like what did I find interesting? That's just kind of how I practice things and refine my taste. Um, I still to this day love watching film. Uh, it's just like one of the biggest inspirations for me as an artist has just been like cinema, and I love watching film. I love seeing how old and modern cinematographers like choose to frame their subjects. Like, I love trying to break down like how I thought things were like lit, just like as an active practice. Um, uh, I mean, you can distill it like even further into like, like reading and stuff like that. But as for like the core practice, it's really just those two things. Like for the visual medium, it's just taking pictures whenever I can, documenting what I found interesting, and then just like digesting artwork. Also, I guess like, going to galleries and like, trying to partake in like the visual art community here, and seeing like what people are doing. Sort of like this like an urge to like stay with the times. Like I want to like keep the brain fresh.
Stay relevant or
Not necessarily
not
relevant,
relevant,
but
but
like keep the brain
stimulated.
stimulated. We were talking about neuroplasticity earlier. Like, I don't want
Get it
things.
all in while you
I
can.
Yeah, less so trying to take it like less so from that aspect, and more of like,
Right.
keep things from getting rigid.
Mm-hmm.
So keep those gears oiled.
Yeah, throw a
Yeah,
wrench in it every now and then when it gets too
exactly.
monotonous. Nice. Okay, cool. So, of all time, who are some of your favorite artists, photographers, movies? Like what, you know,
Um,
you said Alien earlier.
yeah. When it comes to cinematographers, like, okay, so like in the sci-fi genre, like the latest Blade Runner movie was awesome, like just from like a final product, but the cinematographer behind that, uh, why am I blanking on his name? Oh man, uh, he uh, he also did like Arrival, and he did this movie. What else did he do? What? Like, of course, I'm blanking on his name as soon as I'll come back. I'll come back to him. He
Okay.
has a podcast and everything that I'm really a huge fan of. But for photographers, in a similar vein, there's this photographer, Gregory Crutzen. I was introduced to his work in school, and Gregory Crutzen was really interesting because he's like a fine art photographer, but he basically creates these like mini movie sets, like for his work. Um, all of his work like basically feels like the still of a movie, but because it's a photograph, it's like there's so much like um there's so much for the eye to like delve into. There's like this term in film called mise en scene or mise en scène. I'm not French, but it refers to basically just like what is in the scene. What are you choosing to have on frame and in camera? And it's sort of like it's more of like a mentality in a way, like of like, being really mindful of like what is in the shot. Everything in the shot matters in
Right.
film. Like that's like
Has
the
an intention.
and so like he really kind of like emphasizes that in his work, because like, like it's hard to describe without showing some of his work, but it'll be like an empty parking lot, and there'll be like a woman like naked holding her baby trying to keep it warm, and then there's like a man in one of the cars in the parking lot with a light on in the distance creating some visual contrast, and then all the license plates will like be empty or something like that, and maybe there'll be like one billboard that says something really like poignant, but like everything in his image feels like
Dream.
a dream. It's very dreamlike in a way, very cerebral. um yeah, well, I'm a huge fan of his work. um and uh yeah, like I feel like from there, like for subject matter, like as of recently, like I feel like I've worked my way backwards because of recently I've been like on this like reading binge, which I know is not like a photographer like a visual art thing, but I've been reading a lot of sci-fi, and there's like this writer, um I don't want to butcher his name, but he wrote this trilogy called The Three Body Problem. He's a Chinese author, and The Three Body Problem is sort of like a sci-fi epic, but it has like his writing style is super clinical in the way that like he incorporates like physics and science in his writing in a very like his books almost read like textbooks sometimes, because he creates this like unique work of fiction that like feels very real, but the concepts that he's tackling get like wilder and wilder. And I just like took a lot of inspiration from that recently, because it's like, you know, the idea that I'm working with like really foundational physical things, like the same lights and the same camera and the same lens, but it's like how can I improve my um what would you call it, like production value, like without really changing my budgets and the stuff I'm working with. um uh, I'm just gonna like look up this guy's name because like
Yeah,
it's
go
really
ahead.
bugging me. Um, Sometimes my brain just works this way, where uh, like it'll just like blank on things like in the moment that I'm supposed to be remembering. Uh, Roger Deakins is his
Roger
name. Yeah,
Deakins.
Roger Deakins. He's like a phenomenal cinematographer.
Is he the Blade Runner guy?
He did the 2049 Blade Runner. Yeah, I don't believe he did the original one. Um, but he's just like I like him because I listened to some podcasts from him, and he has this like perfectionist sort of attitude towards how he lights things. The idea that like he kind of talks in this way that like, which I don't always agree with, but like in his mind, like there's a perfect way to light something. When you have a scene where something very specific is supposed to happen, and the director wants this idea to come across or this concept to come across, in his mind it's like cinematography can be very formulaic in the way that like, oh, there is like a perfect sort of like platonic way of like shooting this. So there's like Plato's ideal shot, and he like thinks he can get like as close to that as possible, which, you know, that's like a very like rigorous way of like thinking about filming, but like it's worked for him because he's like created some like those beautiful like compositions. um but yeah, like I really enjoy his work quite a bit. Um, there's this photographer, I believe his name is uh, Ruben Wu, I believe is his name, um, and he did this project recently that I thought was very interesting because it was for National Geographic, which like I have like a familial tie to, and he photographed Stonehenge using his own artistic style, which is like he does this thing where he like does like long exposure photography, but like with like he uses drones or he attaches lights to the drones, and then will like basically like light up giant objects like rocks in the Nevada desert or these
Wow, the drone
mountains.
will just fly up with a
Mm.
light.
Yeah, so the drone will basically paint these large objects from above with light
Wow.
to create these really like, I mean, you couldn't do that with like lights on the ground. You couldn't like, or like within reasonable time. You know, you couldn't just like point your flashlight and expose like a whole mountain, but like he's able to do that with these like drones and stuff. And I don't know, it's like I like trying to find like photographers who are getting like really innovative with like their techniques. It's like that's the thing too, with photography that I think is why I've like really taken to it, is it feels like photography has, as an art form, has evolved with photography as a technology in a way, because like the camera is like this technological tool, and as its capabilities have gotten better and more diverse, so has like the art that we've been able to create with it. Like a prime example that applies to a film and still photos is like the sensitivity of the camera. Like you know how much detail can the camera resolve with X amount of light. In like early motion picture film, for example, was like not that sensitive to light. It needed a lot of light to expose it properly, which is why like earlier films, if you watch them, they like a lot of the lighting is like hard lighting, and it's like really really bright,
like 50s and 60s.
Yeah, 50s and 60s. And like if you like read like interviews from like actors back then, they talk about how hot the rooms are and how like short they could be on camera, because like they're having to use these like incredibly powerful lights to expose the film, because in a motion picture the film is running through the camera like 24 times a second, so like very little time to expose the film. But as filmmaking technology has gotten better, film has been able to get more and more sensitive while still retaining detail, allowing us to create like I think of horror movies, where now in modern horror movies there's so much like utilization of like blackness and darkness, where there'll be like objects just barely visible in the shadows, and then like, they'll come out of the shadows and go into the shadows, and like without like a lot of clever workarounds, that was almost impossible with like earlier film. But it's like cameras have been able to like attain more stops of dynamic range, basically like having really bright stuff and dark stuff exposed equally on camera. And we just through that we've been able to like unlock like a lot more of creative potential.
Wow. I think of Halloween,
Mm-hmm.
when Michael Myers emerges from the darkness.
Mm-hmm.
Like you see him and then he's just there.
Mm-hmm.
And they had to do that with the camera technique.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like and that's the thing too that's like interesting about film, is like, or just photography in general, is like you like the problem solving aspect of it, when like with like an unlimited budget, it's not that like the impossible becomes possible, but it's just easier to achieve your image sometimes. But you can, I don't know, I always liked you know taking a really low budget and seeing if I can create something that looks high budget by creating like artificial workarounds. Like one time I worked on a video project in school where the assignment was to create a one shot short film, or just like you had 1 minute and you couldn't have any cuts or anything like that, and you had to like make some unique video with like in a 1 minute one take. And I really wanted to like have a lot of like movement in my shot. Like I wanted there to be like this complicated camera movement, but I didn't have access to like a crane or a dolly or anything like that. So what I did was I knew how to use video editing software very well, and I put a tripod on top of my friend's car. And what the shot, basically what it looked like, I should describe that first, was basically I shot the sky of like a steeple of a church, and then the camera starts floating and moving almost like it's on a crane, and then it pans down, and then you see this young woman leaving the church, clearly like like in some sort of dismay. She looks upset or something like that. And then the camera gets closer and closer to her, almost like it's on a dolly on a crane. And then by the time it gets right up to her, the camera pans all the way down, and it's looking through the sunroof of a car. And she gets in the car, and there's someone in the car driving the car. and the person tries to grab her hand and like to console her, and she like withdraws her hand. Create some sort of drama. I just wanted like
And you see it all through the sunroof.
and yeah, so it looked like basically I had some sort of crane where the camera was like on a crane, and then it pans over, and then it gets on top of the car and looks down. In reality, I'm like on top of this car with a tripod filming like like while this car is moving, and so the car is my dolly up until the point where it parks, and then through editing, I just have the sound of the car basically. Like the sound of the engine pitch in, like raise in volume slowly throughout the shot. So it looks like and feels like I'm on a crane, a camera crane, and I'm approaching the car because the car is getting louder auditorily. In reality, like I'm on the car the whole time, and it is my dolly until I get to the part where it's supposed to be staged, and I pan down. And so I felt really proud of that because I was like, I had like just a camera and a tripod and our video editing software. But I made something that I felt like looked like I had like some crazy camera rig, but it was just
Wow.
Yeah. But like I don't know, I love that about like filmmaking and photography is like
Get creative with how it's done.
yeah, like you have like this problem what that there's like technical means of solving like I'm not like I'm not an illustrator, I'm not a painter, and I'm sure there's similar analogs to that where like you you have this idea in your head, and like how am I gonna like draw that, how am I gonna paint that, how am I gonna get this color right. What's interesting about like photography is like I have these like tools, like these like I guess there's analogs for everything because you can say like there's brushes and pencils, but like yeah, that's what it is. It's like understanding what the right tool for the job is. But the tools themselves, I'm just so fascinated with because they're so high tech. Cameras, just there's
Stands and whatnot.
yeah, like from like the lights and the stands to like the camera itself. I just like find it so interesting that like we have this tool that can like capture light in the way that the eye captures light, and that you can manipulate it and work with it. Like that's just so interesting to me, and I find that's like what separates it from all other mediums. And it's why some people take to it as art and some people don't take to it as art, is because there's sometimes there's less interpretation to be done. Like you can press a button on the camera and you're like basically just stolen the light from a scene, and the way that it looked in your brain is how it's going to look on camera. There's other ways in which you can get creative with the camera and your lighting choices, in which like you make something completely new out of like the thing you shot in the first place.
And then you can make it something no one's ever seen.
Yeah, exactly. Like it looks like people. I mean, it's like the term movie magic. Like it's like you. No one. I don't want people to know that like this was shot on like a psych wall, and I don't want people to know that like where the boundaries of the shot are, where does it begin or end. Like that's what's so interesting about like composing for for like this kind of work is like it's almost just a bit intentional as what you put in the shot as to like what you exclude in the shot. And I find that like that's why I've been really interested in like the subjects in my landscape work, because it's like I want to create the feeling that like these buildings or these slides, these lampposts are like almost like alone, like in like an empty, out of bounds landscape sorts. Because like you don't get to see you don't get to see what's outside of the frame,
Yeah.
but through like the tones, the lighting, the minimalism of it all, you just get the sensation that like this is like no real place. This is like a dream or something
That's
like
how I
that.
felt about your water slide photo.
Yeah, I really enjoyed
That
that. That was
one,
fun. That was fun.
that one was like this mysterious.
Mm.
Oh,
That was so like to break that one down, like without like I mean to reveal like the secrets behind it, like or how my brain works. Like so, the original picture, like the composition was the same, but there was like a parking lot visible with cars, like right just above the horizon, like the tops of cars, and and then the whole thing was fenced in too. There was a fence around the whole area of the slide, and there was also like logos on the slide, and basically like I edited those things out of the image because that's what, when I think of these atmospheres that I want to create, I have to, remove what I think is like attaching it to reality.
Parameters, yeah.
Yeah, like in order to create this feeling that these things are just suspended.
A void.
Yeah, and a void is like, I gotta remove what like makes the familiarity of it all.
Right.
Like, we're familiar with a slide.
Trying to keep it timeless.
Yeah, exactly. And that's been something too that's like been fun, kind of like analyzing myself, is like, what do I feel like needs to be removed? Sometimes it's obvious, like branding, for example, like that. I don't want branding in my images because that
takes away
from the feeling,
wherever it's placed.
It
becomes like your,
because like part of that is not just the location, but like the time, and like that logo, like, oh, it's like, in maybe 10, 20 years, like that, you'll be able to identify that as like, that was 2020 Pepsi Cola logo or something like that.
Yeah.
And so removing that. And then another thing too is like, uh, a lot of times I'll like change the sky a lot in my images for landscapes, because I feel like part of like the minimalist aesthetic that I'm trying to achieve involves creating a lot of negative space. And so the biggest form of negative space in landscapes is the sky, usually, unless the foreground's barren. And so sometimes the sky in the image will be too busy, and I'm like, okay, well, I don't want all these clouds here. I want it to feel like empty. I want it to be a clear blue day. Like this image in my head feels like it would achieve what it wants to achieve if it was empty. Or sometimes for certain images, I'll I love the way that the moon looks during the day sometimes. Like I always found that interesting as a kid.
You can see the moon during the day.
Yeah, like that was so interesting to me, because I'm like, oh, you grow up with this like archetype that like sun is day and moon is night, and then you're a kid and one day you go outside and you're like, I can see both at the same time. Like space is more than that. Like space is weird like that. Okay, it's not uniform. Yeah, perspective. Like things aren't binary like day and night. Like there's like this hidden dynamic among everything that's so strange. And so one of my images, like I put a moon in the shot during the day, because I was like, that was like the cherry on top almost of like completing the piece. Or sometimes, like for the slide image, returning to that, like I want, like, so much of the foreground was blue, like the pool was blue, and the slide was blue, which I thought was really interesting, because like, the location I found that at, like, I know I've never seen a pool that was like painted blue like that. And so I was like, oh, like if that's the sky and that's my empty space in the foreground, then I want to do the opposite with the sky, and I want to make the sky pastel and swirly and busy. And so I added clouds to that image and did almost like the inverse of what I typically do. But yeah, it's like, that's just kind of like me breaking down my process of like, when it comes to like landscape stuff, is like deducing like what I think is distracting, and then at the end thinking about what might possibly add to it. um I sit with images a lot. Like I feel like I'm not like a candid photographer or a street photographer, like not because I feel like I can't become skilled at that, but because like my brain's too analytical after the fact. Like after I take an image, I know there's so many more choices to be made, that yeah, like I much rather just like, if I'm gonna like take an image and edit it, like sit with it for a long time, than just kind of like just pump out images and stuff like that. Like, I want to make more of an impact with each individual thing. Kind of like the mise en scene we were talking about earlier with like film and Gregory Cruzen's photography. Like I want everything to feel intentional and not just circumstance of the moment.
Yeah, so what like inspires your creativity, or like you said, these voids or these places?
It's a lot of stuff. Um, and you talk like referring to like earlier in the conversation, like I feel like growing up, I just grew up in the social equivalent of like like I feel like the suburbs of America are like almost like these out of bounds zones in a sense where like a lot of like the cultural mixing pots and the hubbub of like the world takes place in these cities, and the further you drive out of the city into these like suburbs, you get these like odd atmospheres with like there's landscaping, there's grass and there's trees and there's buildings, but they start to become like um I don't know, they feel like eerie and artificial because the grass is so well kept and the trees are so uniform in their placement, and the houses sometimes like are very
Cookie
identical.
cutter.
Yeah, multi like they follow the same, like the homeowners association gave them like a palette they could work with, for example. And I feel like growing up in those areas, it's like I don't know, I feel like I draw a lot of inspiration from that because they're nostalgic, but almost in like a unsettling kind of way. I feel like that's like with in pop culture, like liminality has kind of like returned as like sort of like a like pop culture aesthetic.
What would you say?
Liminality.
Oh,
It's so like it's like in pop culture, it's lost a lot of its meaning. Like
liminality is in like sparse thing, or like
oh, like referring to like the definition of the word is like about like places that feel like in between moments in time and feel out of bounds and feel um almost like a memory that's manifests itself into a reality in a
uh,
way, or a transitionary point between places. Like 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 purgatory in the Bible, for example, or in like Catholicism, like that's like a religious liminal space. It's like these things that are not anywhere close to the binaries of like society or like spirituality that we put in place. Um, but in pop culture, like liminality has sort of like took in this um, like pre 2008 like market collapse, like nostalgic feeling to them. Like a lot, if you look up like liminal on like social media, for example, or like on Instagram or on Tumblr or anything like that, you'll get these like grainy images of like places that look like abandoned Chuck E. Cheese's from the early 2000s, or like abandoned shopping malls that have like the early 2000s look with like the cups with the swirly design on it and the neon lights, but they're all empty. And so like that's a big thing too, is they're always empty. There's no people in them. But yeah, I find it interesting that like in pop culture, it's like there's like this perversion of nostalgia almost happening. Like you're taking these like iconic places from like people in my generation's childhood and making them feel eerie, or yeah. But I feel like
that's what you try to do, or that's what?
that's what I like. That's a visual inspiration of mine. It's not necessarily what I'm trying to do because, like I said, I avoid like I don't want my images to feel like necessarily like upright creepy. I'm okay with like introducing a little bit of an unsettling feeling,
Alone,
alone, isolating, but I don't want it to feel like I like
menacing.
yeah, I don't want it to feel menacing. I don't want it to be like grungy. I don't want there to be like noise, and I want it to look like it's taken from like like a Nokia cell phone. Like I want it to like
Or imply some negative thing,
yeah, like apply that there's like that's a big thing
like a
too, is
crime or something
like
going
crime
on.
happened there. Like a lot of them are imply that there's something evil or bad there. There's a creature
Lurking.
there lurking behind the corner around this, like, I don't necessarily want to do that.
Right.
It's like daylight liminality. It's like liminality plus. Like, it's like I like I like my images to feel bright and airy, but also retain sort of like that, like, isolating.
Like that's all that exists
Yeah.
in that world.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's like if you go outside that, it's just like the black walls in a video game or something like.
Yeah, and so like that's I love I'm very inspired by pop culture, and like regarding like, yeah, I brought this up earlier, but like, I played a lot of video games when I was younger, and like, you know leaving like, have you heard the term like no clip before?
No clip.
Yeah, so it's like it's a developer term, like a video game developer term for like, basically in games, what makes rigid bodies like not pass through one another is clipping. Like, an object like, well, like you give it like a rigid body, and you tell this object like, okay, it can't pass through other rigid bodies. But when you access like the console, like cheat code and or cheat codes in the game, you can turn off clipping of your character, and your character can walk through walls and stuff like that.
Fall through the map.
And that's how you find, like I was talking about earlier, you find these weird areas outside the map that sometimes developers will like accidentally leave in their games. Like, a developer will build like a level like 1/16 of the way through, like just have the basis of a level, and they'll abandon it. And instead of deleting it, they'll just leave it there in this like void of the map, and then they'll just build the real game somewhere else in the same level. And you wouldn't know that, but if you no clip, if you leave the map, you'll find all these like half-built realities just scattered throughout the game. At least in like the games I play, like in the Source engine and stuff. And I really, really like, I don't know, just something about it was so like, um, captivating to me, or eerie. I don't know. I was like, why is this here?
Access.
What does this mean? Am I supposed to be able to be here? That was the thing too. Is like that feeling of like, I don't think I'm supposed to
It's
see
like you
this.
snuck out of the house.
Yeah, you snuck out of the house and you saw something you weren't supposed to see.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. And like, that's also found its way in pop culture recently. One of my favorite. I used to really love these things called creepy pastas. It's like the funniest term, but the pasta refers to paste, like copy and paste, and it's basically the internet's campfire stories. It's like short horror stories that get passed along on the internet, and they've like changed throughout time so much. Like these like, iconic short stories, but one that's come up very recently that I find sort of silly, but also kind of like endearing because it's nostalgic for me. Is this one short story? It's not even a short story, but this aesthetic of the back rooms. Yeah, you should look into this. It's very interesting. Like the lore behind this has like changed so much, but the lore of the back rooms is it looks like this abandoned, cubicle office space, but there's no chairs, there's no desks. It's just the walls and the carpet floor, and then the buzzing fluorescent lights, and it goes on forever. It's just like this infinite office space. And the idea behind it,
What is it called again?
the back rooms. Yeah, and so the idea behind it, and they use the term no clip in this, which I found endearing, but like the people in the community that have been developing this sort of like the backrooms lore talk about how you get there if reality is a simulation of some sorts, like a video game almost. And it's very rare, but like sometimes some people might accidentally like no clip out of reality for a second. Like someone might bump into a chair just at the right angle at the right moment in time when the particles line up perfectly, and just like fall out of reality, and you fall into the back rooms. And the back rooms are like the if God was a developer, it's those out of bound areas that you're not supposed to be, but you accidentally ended up. And like that's like the horror of the back rooms, is like, if life is a simulation
And you
accidentally
got out.
got out of it and you're stuck there. And so like I found that, I was like, oh, that's so bone chilling, but also like it's funny because it borrows early video game culture, like, no clipping. And out of bounds areas. Like those are things that like you don't really see in modern like video games now because modern video games are so
Well developed.
well people argue about that, but yes,
Yeah,
they're
whatever.
super well developed. They're very rigid. You can't enter cheat codes like on a keyboard anymore. Like in a lot of video games, uh, they won't let you do that. They don't want you to break their video game.
Oh yeah,
But the source engine, um, it's in its name. It was open source. It was one of the first like big video game engines, like platforms that video games were developed on. That was open source. Anybody could like
mess with it.
mess with it, and I feel like they inadvertently created like a whole subculture
Of like
of just like
messed up video game kind of thing.
yeah, messed up video game things, or like that's what that was like. You basically open sourced creativity in the metaverse. Like you let these kids who the first generation of kids to really grow up with the internet. You like gave them access to a tool to like create
Around,
three-dimensional worlds, and it's like it was very just fun to be a part of that growing up.
definitely.
You know,
Okay, cool. What are some of your strengths and weaknesses as an artist?
um, weaknesses. I I'm very bad at letting things go, um, declaring things are that as being done. Um, I I like to sit with things maybe a little too long because of this perfectionist mindset I have. I have like I combat that voice in my head that's like it's like the Roger Deakins cinematographer mindset, the idea that like there's a perfect way in which like this thing I'm trying to do can be done, and I'll know when I get there, and I should keep trying. And so I'm like I'm not the best at like accepting something as being like worthy of myself, um, and it causes like a huge backlog of things. Like if you look at the things that like I make public on my website or my on Instagram, for example, and then you compare it to like how many photos on how many hard drives I have, it's like it's such a disproportionate like amount. Like I have like terabytes of like photos just like on hard drives, just like and so most of them completely unedited and like or anything. I just took them, and some I spent hours on and just didn't even do anything with them because I don't know. Like I just it almost feels like complete chance that something make something public. Like I was just in the right mood one day. I was like, oh yeah, I like this. I'll share it. But there's so many other things that I liked at one point, and I just didn't really feel in the mood to share. And I yeah, I feel like I need to. That's something I'm not the best at. Um, but a strength though is like being able to identify what things could be done better. They almost like
The potential.
yeah, exactly. Like they're these two, the strength and weakness like kind of go along with each other. Like the strength I feel like is I can look at any project of mine and tell you exactly like what I would have done better, what could have been done better, or what I will do better, different next time, and utilize differently next time. And
We take note.
yeah, take notes. Like I was talking earlier about how my form of storyboarding is more of just like an engineer's notepad. I'm really good at just analyzing something that is inherently artwork, like it's subjective, but I'm able to like with pull out and the technical aspects of it and figure out which gears need oiled and whatnot. I'm also like because I'm like a complete nerd. Like I'm really good at like navigating the internet and finding the tools and resources I need to like learn the stuff that will better my work and whatnot. Like I don't know. I feel like I'm really I have a talent for like navigating the internet. regarding like finding information that will help me as an artist. Um, uh,
Having the reasons,
yeah, exactly. Which was like what I was
which
talking
makes you
earlier.
go to the answers.
Hmm.
You don't find the answers till you have enough reasons.
Yeah, and that's why I feel like and maybe this is a weakness. I don't know yet, but like the pace at which I work is very slow because I feel like once I create a final product, I like to just like take long breaks afterwards and just kind of meditate on the project before I even think about like starting something else, you know? Like um so yeah, I can't determine if that was a pro or con. Like imposter syndrome tells me it's a con because it's like, oh, like, you know, if you want to be like noticed as an artist, you gotta like be on your shit. You gotta keep making more work all the time and get stuff out there. Like you gotta show that you're a hard worker. Hard like that's the thing, is like hard work for me sometimes um co-aligns with just like time spent versus like another way of looking at things is that you're gonna create better work if you're in a better mental sphere and you've been able to think about things for a while and refresh your mind and transfer your state of mind into something new, like you're gonna remain poignant and fresh. But yeah, like that's an internal battle of mine.
It's like, yes, you can let things linger and study and think on them, but then eventually there needs to be an endpoint so you can then either move on or find something else, or
Exactly. Like
you got to give yourself a deadline.
like I don't want to be like no pun intended, but I don't want to be stuck in these like these headspaces. You know, like
These back rooms.
maybe like that's like uh, you know, a meaning that's like come up in my work unintentionally is just like feelings of being stuck, you know, like
Yeah,
feeling being
writer's block.
yeah, being out of place and stuck and lost and disassociated, derealized. Like these are things that like I've struggled a lot with. Like
Isolation.
yeah, and uh, yeah, I feel like that those are things that I've struggled with, and struggle is like a very powerful motivator for artists, and it is for me too.
Yeah.
I think in the moment of creating it though, it's meditative, and I'm not struggling. I'm not like when I'm taking these photos and I'm editing them and I'm having my shoots, like I'm not like angsty, and I'm not
Yeah.
like distraught and alone and depressed.
You can save those feelings for later.
yeah, I've saved those for like the analysis of it retrospectively, but um,
But in the time,
been in the time, it's
it's
like
all that there is.
yeah, exactly. Um, which is like ties into the theme earlier. It's just like when I'm working on my art, it's all I can think about, and I want it to stay that way.
It keeps you like
Yeah,
feeling like you're living out your potential.
yeah, and I'm very protective of that. I guess like I um like the like capitalist in me tells me like like keep you gotta keep taking photos, you gotta keep posting photos, and you gotta keep people interested. Like you're a business,
Keep churning out.
keep churning content out. But then
But then,
but then the other part of me is like like that's like like my relationship with my art form is it's meditative, and as soon as I feel myself start catering towards that capitalist part of my brain, I'm like I get like really disgusted with myself. I'm like, no, like don't do that to this thing that you've like fought so hard to like become a solace for your
yeah, a refuge.
yeah, refuge, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. How would you best describe the type of artist you are?
um uh like sporadic in a way, maybe not necessarily in like the work I make, but like when I choose to make it and how I choose to make it. Like I'm always wanting to do something new. Um, like I'm wanting to refine a vision and refine an aesthetic, but I want the way in which I tackle it to always feel fresh. And
New
so,
methods. Or
hmm yeah, new methods. I think I'm a little bit more understated in my presentation. I like, other than the work itself, like the visual, um, I put a lot of thought into my titles. But other than that, like I can be a little short and sweet with my artist statements behind each project. Um, not that because not just because I'm wanting the art to do all the talking, but that's almost like, part of like the feeling I want my work to give off is this. I want to have this quaintness to it, and so if I have this artwork, these images of mine that are supposed to evoke these isolating feelings or these tender feelings, and then there's like this wall of text next to it explaining the whole thing in like pages. I just feel like it's like kind of productive for me. I find,
lose the mystery,
yeah,
the
and
mystique.
the mystery is not only an external one that I'm trying just to portray to other people, but it's an internal mystery too. I'm That's why I'm so hesitant to write these long artist statements, because I so much of it's a mystery to me too. I mean, even in our conversation today, I mean, I'm formulating perspectives about my own artwork that I've probably never really written down before. Maybe I've journaled about and stuff like that, but never in a long form way like this, just because it's not really through anything other than cooperative investigation that you realize what are hidden themes.
That we live by, or
What was that?
that we live by,
Yeah, exactly.
undercurrents,
Hmm.
subconscious.
Yeah, it's almost like, through like, like the last project in the firmament, I um I did a lot of planning, because you have to for a certain point. I have this studio for X amount of time, and I have X equipment that's going to be there at my disposal. Like I want to have an outline of what I'm going to do, but I don't want to be too rigorous in my in pre-conceptualizing the compositions, because so much of the work of my own that I like myself the most were things that were spontaneous in the moment, things that like I
Ephemeral.
yeah, exactly. And it's rare that I've, other than film, like the video stuff, all of my photos, like I feel like there's been some part about it, whether it be in the editing or the actual acquisition of the image, that like was totally unplanned for, but not totally unplanned for, but um like I basically I think of my philosophy of photography is like create the boundary, create your play space, but don't like put too many pawns inside that play space. Like that will happen naturally. Like
Keep it a
it's
sand, or keep it like a sandbox.
yeah, sandbox, exactly. It's like, it's like you have your game
Don't
engine.
overthink it.
Yeah,
Have fun.
you got your game engine, you got your tools, like it's there. Like have faith in yourself, like it'll
Let it happen.
let it happen. And I struggle with that because imposter syndrome tells you like
Rigid
you
structure.
gotta plan it, because if you're not planning it,
Precision.
you're not good.
It's gotta be serious.
Yeah, exactly.
I
Like,
gotta take
are
it
you
seriously.
not talented enough to like
I can
create
take it
like
to this level.
to take it?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
The inner dialogue of, yeah, do more, can be more.
Yeah, yeah. And I wouldn't say it's been until like very recently that I've like even started to develop like a lasting fondness for my work. Like when I create like stuff, like I love it. Um, but I typically have this attitude that like when I'm done with something, I don't like to look back. I'm always forward thinking. I don't like to I like to think about the concepts and develop like new ideas, but I don't like look at my work, old work, like too long. Like I
So you
just
want to get trapped there, or
yeah, I don't want to
you
be
always
trapped
want to
there.
be on the cutting edge of your own abilities. Like,
Absolutely, absolutely.
I don't want to be known for this thing I did a while back. I got to keep
Yeah,
going,
yeah,
keep
exactly.
redefining
Um,
before you get before too much gets out there, and then there is a rigid frame with which I
yeah,
don't know.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's
Before you
like,
define yourself too much, like no, I'm still I could be different, or
uh
there's
huh.
something new I haven't done.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, what kind of photography gear do you use?
Um,
Some people don't like to give this stuff away or talk about it.
no, I love talking about technical stuff. I have a lot. Some of my close friends know that about me. Like I'm very like nerdy with that kind of stuff, and like one of my really good friends, Adam, he works like at a camera rental shop with like lights and cameras, and I love talking with him because he's just like an encyclopedia. Like he just knows everything about like what the cutting edge is for that stuff. But for me, um, like I said earlier, like I use this camera. Um, it's called the brand's a Ricoh. It's a Ricoh GR3, and so it's like a point and shoot camera about the size of like my iPhone, maybe a little bit smaller, and it just can fit in my pocket. And I like it because the form factor is small, but the size of the photo sensor on it is large. Like it's basically almost the size of a piece of film, which like for imaging quality is like um, it creates. I'm putting the word better in brackets, but it creates a better image. The larger your photo site, the the more sensitive your film is to light and the more gradations of color you can capture. Because if you think of like a photo sensor as like an array of pixels, like little squares, let's say if you only had two squares, you know,
It'd be blurry.
if you wanted to show like a gradient from like red to orange, from one red to like to an orange, like all in the red at like red end of the spectrum, but just slightly different shades. If you have two pixels, it's gonna look like super contrasted. You got like your sharp red, your deep red, and then you got your light orange. But the more squares you stack between it, the more steps you can have between the colors. And so that's sort of the mentality of having a larger photo sensor is when you capture your image, you got more steps of color between the changes from light to shadow, from bright colors to dark colors. And so that's why I chose that camera, was because it was the smallest camera I could get that had a sensor that I was willing to work with.
Wow.
And then for that last shoot of mine, for lights and stuff, that was fun because a lot like a lot of lighting technology has moved to LED technology, kind of like these lights you're using in this room, because they're low power out draw. They're hot. They don't get hot relatively, and it's really easy to like change the color usually. Um, but so they're good for like I like using those lights for um, filling spaces. Like in that shoot that I did in the firmament, there was an LED grid on the ceiling. So basically, a bunch of these little LED panels all on the ceiling, and they were connected to like a control board, and I could very quickly like change the light and mix the light on the fly. Um, Whereas like old cinema lights, these hot lights, these bulbs, not only they take a lot of power, they're very hot. They're very hot. They can explode if you get oil on them on the glass. And in order to change the color, you gotta put gels like filters in front of them. So they're much more. There's a lot more
Cumbersome.
encumbersome, yeah, to cumbersome to change the light. But the quality of light that they create is very unique. I mean, LED technology is getting close, but I've always been able to just feel something different with those lights. So for that shoot, the lights that create the orb and the light, the beam that's illuminating the subjects, those are the hot lights. Those are tungsten beam
Oh
bulbs.
wow.
They're like, I think they were like 750 watt um, lights. Um, yeah, they were very bright, but they I chose them because the lighting fixture that they're in. Forgot the name of the lens. It's not a Fresnel lens. It's a basically the lensing apparatus that spreads the light from the little tiny bulb inside of it creates this like um, chromatic aberration around um, not only the edge of the spotlight, but also like on specular highlights, like really bright white points on people, like on the glittery parts of the fabric, and on like their jewelry and stuff. It creates this like chromatic aberration where like there's a little bit of like a purpley red like outline and hue to the edge of the light, and I really like that. Some people, I mean, that's like they want to avoid that. That's why they choose LED lights because there's not a lot of not just LED lights, but they avoid that lensing system
Hmm.
because they don't want that aberration. But some people like it, and I thought it fit the piece perfectly. So that's why I chose that light for the subjects, and I chose the LEDs for because they were available to light up the background.
Oh.
Mm.
What about video cameras? Do you have a video camera or?
um, my not personally, like not a dedicated video camera. I used to have one. I like all through school. I had this thing. It was a Panasonic GH4, is what it was called. It was basically like it looked like a DSLR, but it was like built around video, so it shot like for the time like very decent video, but it took like you didn't have to buy super expensive cinema lenses for it because it took like regular photo lenses,
Hmm.
and so for a college student that was perfect. Like I wanted something that took like good video, but I don't have to. Most of the price of a camera comes with the lenses, not the
Yeah.
actual camera, and so knowing that I chose that system. But I sold that about a little over a year ago, just because when I was doing video projects, I was always
Renting
renting
or?
a camera specific for the project, or a friend had like a much nicer camera. So um, really nice like video cameras are like I should call them film like cinema cameras. Like those are like investments, and like if you're starting a production company or you
That's like
shoot,
the main money pot, or like where all the money goes.
yeah, like renting that thing out is going to get you a lot of money. So I don't own one of those.
Okay.
Yeah, I rent them out occasionally, but um, I don't shoot enough film
Film,
to
right?
justify it.
I understand. So you're from here, and then you went to UTK,
Hmm.
and then you graduated and moved back here.
Hmm.
So how long have you been here since graduating?
So I graduated in 2020, so like a little over 3 years.
Okay.
Mm.
What what's kept you here?
Troll melting pot that it is, but there's something really endearing about like living in a city where you run into familiar faces all the time. And Nashville's like growing really fast, and so that's kind of like very quickly becoming like a different thing. But like it's still a small city compared to others in this country.
Right. What's your favorite place to shoot here, or
Um,
where?
well, like my when it comes to just like shooting like on the fly, like I love riding my bike. Um, because like my brain like needs constant stimulation, and so like I love like constantly changing my scenery. Uh, And so it's not like really like one specific place that I like to shoot specifically. I'm always wanting to find like new places with new interesting imagery. But when it comes to places that I like to just like frequent, um, and that'll also occasionally bring my camera. I love like the nature centers here. Like Shelby Bottoms is so beautiful. I love that park um, from the bottom of my heart. I love like there's something really nice about like the farmland. Like when you get out of the
Just drive 20
city, yeah,
minutes.
drive 20, 30 minutes out like north and stuff like that. I really like those areas. I yeah, I tend to typically avoid the denser urban areas. Like if I'm going to bring my camera anywhere, just because like from what I know I like in my images, like
There's too much stuff.
yeah, too much commercialism, too much people. Like that's it's. I do like making a challenge of myself to go to places like that and see if I can make an image from it, like where I'll remove people. I love removing people from like scenes that typically have people and removing all the branding and stuff. But most of the time, I'll stay away from like places like that, such as Broadway or whatnot.
Right.
Hmm.
Okay. What is some advice you'd give to someone who's going to move here and pursue art?
Well, I would say focus on developing your community first, maybe. Um, like stay true to yourself and like practice your art, but like a big thing that's gonna keep you like engaged and motivated is having like, and by community I mean like one or two people. Sometimes like just like find people that you can keep a constant repertoire with, like people you can engage with, get feedback from, um, that you're close with. Also like finding like an area you like and staying there too has like taught me a lot because I was moving around a lot once I came back from school, and then at my current place now out in East Nashville, like I'm coming up on a year being there, and like just feel like I'm finally like really getting like acclimated to like the people on the scene out there, and
Here,
hmm,
East Nashville.
East Nashville, yeah, here, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We're out of bounds,
We're
but
out of.
we're out of bounds right now. But yeah, like so, like really kind of staying put for a second like helps. Um, but and then also, don't take advantage of the resources that um, Nashville gives to you to like find things that are going on. Like, I mean, the Nashville scene, your podcast, for example. Um, there's like independent record labels here that post like about like shows going on. Like um, there's a lot that like the community does to serve itself here that you wouldn't be aware of if you stuck with like your mainstream like news outlook looks and stuff and just relied on like you know like the tourist like traps of Nashville are just so unrepresentative of like what the art culture is here.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's representative in one way, in a big way, which is like
Sure.
there's lots of singer songwriters here. Like, no escaping that. Like, that's a thing. But like the diversity of singer songwriters, for example, or other mediums of artwork,
Mm-hmm.
are so just like drastically underrepresented by Nashville's tourist sort of scene. So definitely like, um, yeah, put on no clip and fly around Nashville. Don't stay in the main character zones like Broadway and stuff. Like you're not gonna find anything there other than like like a $12 PBR or something like that.
Right.
But on the plus side, you'll hear live music from people that are trying to make it and trying very hard, and so like it's not like all for none, but
No,
it's also a financial trap.
it is.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. What is your biggest personal growth from last year to this
Um, expanding my group of friends. I've been like in one of my um, extroverted eras right now. Left a pretty introverted era in a new extroverted era chapter, I should say. And so um, there's that. Um, could you repeat the question again? You're asking specifically like what's good
Yeah,
about this year?
or like what is something, I guess, personal realization from
Mm.
last year, this year, change, or
Yeah, I would say also like my relationship with my job has changed in a good way. Or jobs in general. Like I've bounced around through so many jobs. Like I was working on film sets, I was working at a production company, I worked at a camera rental house for a little bit. Like I jobs were starting to develop this personality that they were temporary to me. I mean, all jobs are temporary, but they were things that like I did not stick with for a while because it was like, oh, like they're just there to get me by, and like I'm not
means
really
to an end?
means to an end. And I my current job is like one of the first jobs I've had where I um, have like really grown fond of and really enjoy my work. And yeah, it shocked me. Like, and when I first had it, I didn't even realize it because I was so stuck in that mindset. But now yeah, my relationship with my job has changed in a very beneficial way.
Nice. Okay, cool. Changing subjects here. How do you consume media? Or like
Manically.
YouTube, or
Oh, like types.
like where, like what rabbit holes do you go down?
Yeah, when it comes to going down rabbit holes, like a lot of that comes from like places like YouTube and like Reddit. Like Reddit's a big one for me because like I can you know filter myself a little bit based on the subreddit or community that I want to be involved in and research and entertain myself with. But usually I'll find like a link, like someone will post an article about like some crazy fact that no one knows about an event in early history, and then I'll look that up, and then there'll be a hyperlink to like something else I'm interested in, and I'll follow that for a while. I also like, I mean, I love keeping up with like humor and pop culture. Like I love like memes and stuff like that. Not as like a form of like meditation or anything like that, but like just like I don't know. I love like engaging. Like my engagement with um like media is like mostly to entertain. When it's not there to like holistically like help me better myself as an artist and research stuff. It's mostly there as like a form of like humor and entertainment and um, stimulation in a way.
What do you watch on YouTube?
Um, recently, okay, so I found this. I really like this one guy. His name is JCS Criminal Psychology, I think is his
Oh
name.
wow.
He basically like um, it's like really. I mean, it's like sometimes it's pretty like intense, but he'll take interrogation footage, like with like when they have like the security camera in the corner of an interrogation
Right, and
room.
there's two guys
There's
staring at one dude.
yeah, two guys staring at one dude and they're talking with him, and he'll basically like break down like, okay, why is this person here? And not only like it's like not only like why is this person here, but like what are these like what methods are these interrogators employing to like get a confession out of him and stuff. And it's just like they're very entertaining in a like
Psychological breakdown.
yeah psychological breakdown kind of
They're
way.
using ad hominem here.
Yeah, exactly. Or like and, like I used to think that like I thought like the whole good cop bad cop thing was like just like for the movies, but it's like no, like
That's
sometimes they
real.
actually do that. It's
Yeah.
like they have someone come in and they'll just be like an absolute dickhead to like
Like, you
the
want to deal with monster?
yeah. Yeah, not to say that the person doesn't necessarily always like deserve it. Like sometimes these people are in there for like very awful things, but you got this person coming in there that's like, I know what you did. Like, I know what you did. Like, I don't understand how you're gonna how you're gonna cope with this and deal with this. Like you're screwed, man. And then someone else comes in and is like, I can help you, dude. Like, they talk to me and like we'll figure something out.
Right.
And like it seems to work like really well, But I don't know. That's what I've been watching a lot recently. I also like video essays too, in a way. People that break down like movies and stuff like that in like very elegant ways. Not I can't think of any specific channels, but I love video essays.
Cool. Well, is there anything you would like to add that I haven't asked you about?
Um, it's hard, man. I've never, I guess, like maybe I interview myself like every day in a way, but like I never really put it to words. I think like I don't, you've asked me like more about myself and my artwork than I've been asked like at all in the past couple of years. So like this is
Oh,
like, and this has been very fulfilling to get this out there.
awesome.
hmm
That's awesome. Cool. Well, what is something absurd you love slash do?
Um, define absurd as in like,
Well, I could tell you something for me.
hmm,
I love vacuuming.
hmm, I see.
I get paid. I mean, I vacuum cars.
hmm I like, okay, carrying on. I like uh customizing and building like keyboards, like mechanical keyboards, like for computers and stuff.
Oh wow!
I love keyboards, like
I
because
didn't know you could customize a keyboard.
oh yeah, oh I'll show you, man. Don't worry. They get pretty custom, and then I love building computers too. Like I'll build them for friends, and I built them for myself. Like yeah, big techno nut. I'll just love like tinkering with things like that. Um, Maybe it's not like absurd though. I feel like I like your vacuuming answer more than that. Maybe keyboards. Some people will find that absurd, but uh, uh, I like. Hmm, I like going alone to like really really big public settings sometimes as like an act of like rebellion against my social anxiety. Sometimes I'll do that. Like I'll go to like social events or like just like to like Broadway just by myself on a whim for no other reason other than just to like be in like around large crowds of people. Which I did that, done that for a while, and then like I wasn't able to do that for a while during COVID and stuff. But recently it's been happening again. I don't know. I love like the stimulation of just like being in like such an actively changing dynamic environment for no other reason other than just the stimulation. Like I'm not even really trying to take a photo or listen to conversations. Like I just like biking or walking or skateboarding through like large crowds. It's just fun for
It's like
me.
you can absorb the energy without even being a part of
Yeah,
it.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, maybe that's absurd. I don't know.
Yeah, I would say I have to agree with you. I will go to a coffee shop and I want to be alone, but I want to also be around people.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Yeah, it's like funny how like sometimes I'll leave my house where I'm alone in my room and I'm like I could get out of my house because I gotta focus. And I'll leave my isolated room and I'll go to a coffee shop where there's like 20 people there. I'm like, oh yeah, this is better. I can concentrate now. Background noise, I guess.
yeah, it
Yeah,
is the stimulation of others doing something similar to
yeah.
you. And
That's why like I yeah, like I live like kind of like in the city, so like, and I did the same thing when I was in Knoxville. And whenever I've like spent nights at my parents' place, like out like in their house, like on the suburb, sometimes I'll go like stir crazy at night because it's so quiet at night. And it's just like
a little
almost,
too placid.
yeah. I'm like, like I can hear like ringing in my ears, and like my thoughts are like echoing in my head. I can hear my heartbeat. Like it's like drives me crazy. So
It's a little too chill.
yeah, a little too chill. Someone's off, right? Yeah, exactly.
Well, cool, dude. Well, thank you for coming over and doing this.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, man. I really enjoyed this. Like, I feel like this was like really fulfilling. Like, I've not had the opportunity to talk like about my artwork like this.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Well, dude, happy to do it, and it was a pleasure.
yeah, pleasure.